Welcome to Hidden Romantic Tales. Please don't forget to subscribe. Rain fell heavily against the city windows that night, leaving the streets glistening as though the world itself had been polished with tears. Amelia sat by the cafe window, her fingers wrapped around a warm cup of tea she no longer tasted. She wasn't waiting for anyone, yet her heart carried a quiet ache, as if it longed for something unnamed. It was in that still, rain-soaked evening when she saw him again. Daniel had always carried an air of strength and quiet confidence, but there was something softer in the way he walked in that night. He shook off the rain from his jacket, his eyes scanning the room until they fell on her. Amelia's chest tightened. It had been months since they last spoke, months of silence after an argument that neither had truly meant. Yet here he was stepping closer, carrying the weight of something she could not name. Amelia. His voice was low, almost unsure, as though speaking her name after so long felt dangerous. She looked up, her heart betraying her with a sudden rush. Daniel. He asked if he could sit, and she nodded, though her hands trembled slightly as she placed her cup down. The air between them was heavy, filled with unsaid words. Memories of laughter, late-night walks, and quiet moments when the world seemed to disappear lingered between them. "I didn't think I'd see you here," Amelia whispered. "Neither did I," Daniel replied softly, his eyes never leaving hers. "But maybe I was meant to." For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the steady rhythm of rain tapping against the glass. Then, without warning, the cafe lights flickered and dimmed. The storm outside had grown fiercer, and with a loud crack of thunder, the power went out. Gasps filled the room, but Amelia barely noticed. In the sudden shadows, Daniel reached for her hand. The warmth of his touch startled her, yet it also soothed something deep inside. His hand was firm but gentle, as though he had been waiting all this time to hold hers again. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice a mix of concern and something else, something unspoken. She nodded, though her breath felt caught in her chest. "Yes, I just wasn't expecting this." The cafe owner lit candles, scattering them across the tables, and in the glow of their soft light, Daniel's face looked different, more vulnerable, more real. The world outside could have been falling apart, yet Amelia only saw him. They sat closer now, the space between them shrinking until the scent of his cologne lingered in the air around her. She wanted to speak, to ask him why he had stayed away, why he was here now, but the words would not form. Instead, Daniel leaned forward slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've missed you, Amelia. More than I thought possible." Her heart pounded wildly. Every part of her wanted to believe him, to fall into the comfort of those words, yet fear lingered. She remembered the arguments, the distance, the heartbreak, of waiting for messages that never came. But still, hearing his confession unraveled something within her. The storm outside raged on, but inside, the cafe had become their world. Daniel reached across the table again, his fingers brushing against hers in a way that made her pulse race. When he stood and moved to her side, she didn't stop him. Instead, she let herself be drawn into his embrace, and when he held her close, she felt things she had never felt before. An aching tenderness, a longing so deep it terrified her, and a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of their story. Her cheek rested against his chest, hearing the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. For the first time in a long while, Amelia felt safe. But safety was fleeting. Because as Daniel held her tighter, he whispered something into her ear that changed everything. "I need to tell you the truth. About why I left." Daniel's words cut through the dim glow of candlelight, leaving Amelia frozen in his arms. Her body stiffened, her breath caught somewhere between fear and longing. She pulled back slightly, searching his face, but his eyes were shadowed by something heavy, something that frightened her more than the storm outside. "What do you mean?" she asked softly, her voice almost trembling. Daniel let out a deep breath, as though the weight of months pressed down on him. He lowered his gaze, his hand still holding hers as if he feared she might slip away. "I didn't leave because I wanted to, Amelia. I left because I had no choice." The words echoed in her chest, sharp and confusing. "No choice? Daniel, you disappeared without a word. You left me wondering if I wasn't enough, if I had done something wrong." His jaw tightened, pain flickering in his eyes. "You were never the reason. You've always been everything to me. But there were things happening that I couldn't explain, things that weren't safe for you to be part of." Amelia's heart pounded harder. His voice shook with truth, yet he was still holding back, still guarding the whole story. She wanted to push, to demand every hidden detail, but part of her feared what she might hear. "What kind of things?" she whispered. Daniel hesitated, his hand brushing against hers, his touch trembling now. "Business matters. People I got involved with who weren't who I thought they were. They threatened me, Amelia. They threatened you too, without you even knowing it. The only way I could keep you safe was to walk away." Her lips parted in shock, her chest tightening with both anger and disbelief. "So you thought leaving me in silence was safer than trusting me with the truth? Do you have any idea how much that broke me?" Daniel's face crumbled, and for the first time, she saw the regret etched into his every feature. "Every night, I hated myself for it. Every night I wanted to come back, but I couldn't risk dragging you into that darkness." Tears welled in Amelia's eyes, blurring the sight of him. She had dreamt of this moment for so long, but she never imagined his explanation would feel this heavy, this raw. Part of her wanted to scream at him for the pain, yet another part wanted to fall deeper into his arms and forget the past. The cafe around them buzzed softly, candle flames flickering as strangers whispered about the storm. But for Amelia and Daniel, the world had shrunk to just the two of them, two broken souls trying to stitch their hearts back together. She finally spoke, her voice fragile. "You should have trusted me. Love isn't about leaving. It's about staying, even when it's hard." Daniel reached out, gently cupping her face in his hands. His touch sent shivers down her spine, and when his thumb brushed away the tear that had escaped her eye, she felt the old familiar warmth return. "You're right," he murmured. "And if I could change the past, I would. But I'm here now, Amelia. I'm here, and I don't want to lose you again." Her heart ached. She wanted to believe him, but doubt lingered. Could love truly survive? After so much silence? Could she trust him when the shadows of his secrets still loomed between them? Before she could answer, a sudden crash of thunder shook the cafe. The power returned, lights flickering back on, and reality hit her like a cold wave. Daniel's world of secrets and threats wasn't gone. It was still there, waiting just beyond the candlelight. And then, as if fate itself wanted to remind her of the danger, the cafe door burst open. A tall man in a dark coat entered, his eyes scanning the room with an intensity that made Amelia's stomach drop. His gaze stopped on Daniel. Daniel's body tensed immediately, his grip on Amelia's hand tightening protectively. "Stay close to me," he whispered urgently. Amelia's breath caught, fear rising in her chest. She looked up at Daniel, whose eyes were no longer soft but sharp, filled with caution. The man in the coat began walking toward them. Every step he took seemed to silence the room, even though chatter still filled the cafe. To Amelia, the sound of his boots on the wooden floor echoed like thunder. Daniel's grip on her hand grew firmer, his body shifting ever so slightly, as if ready to shield her from whatever was about to unfold. "Daniel?" the man said when he reached their table. His voice was low, almost casual, but there was an edge to it, a warning hidden beneath the calm. Amelia's heart raced. She glanced at Daniel, whose face had become a mask of composure, though his clenched jaw betrayed the storm brewing inside him. "What do you want?" Daniel asked, his tone steady. The man gave a faint smile, though his eyes never softened. "You know what I want. You shouldn't be here, not in the open. You've been ignoring calls, avoiding meetings. That's not wise." Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. She didn't understand everything, but she understood enough. This stranger was tied to the secrets Daniel had kept. Daniel stood slowly, his hand brushing Amelia's arm in a silent promise of protection. "This isn't the place," he said firmly. The man's eyes flickered to Amelia, lingering for a second too long. "I see you've been keeping company. Interesting choice. She looks important." Amelia's stomach twisted. Her fingers instinctively reached for Daniel's sleeve, clinging to him. She didn't like the way the man looked at her, as though she had become leverage in a game she didn't know she was part of. Daniel stepped slightly in front of her, blocking the man's view. His voice lowered, steel threading through his words. "Leave her out of this." The man chuckled, shaking his head. "You know how it works, Daniel. Nothing is ever really out of it. You can't protect her if you keep pretending you can stand against us." "Then watch me," Daniel replied. The cafe owner, sensing tension, glanced nervously at them, but no one dared to interfere. The storm outside roared on, lightning flashing through the windows, mirroring the intensity building between the two men. Finally, the man leaned closer, lowering his voice so only Daniel and Amelia could hear. "You have until tomorrow night. After that, things will not be so pleasant." With that, he straightened, adjusted his coat, and walked out as calmly as he had entered. Amelia sat frozen, her chest tight with fear. When the door shut behind him, she turned to Daniel, her voice shaking. "Who was that?" Daniel ran a hand through his hair, frustration flashing across his face. "Someone I've been trying to keep away from you. His name doesn't matter. What matters is that you understand now, Amelia. This is why I left. I didn't want you anywhere near this world." Tears stung her eyes as she whispered, "But I'm already in it now, aren't I?" Daniel's shoulders slumped, the weight of her words heavy. He sat back down beside her, taking her trembling hands into his. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to feel this fear. I never wanted you to look at me and wonder if being with me would ruin your life." She searched his eyes, seeing both love and torment there. "Then tell me the truth, Daniel. All of it. I'd rather face the danger with you than spend another day not knowing." He shook his head, his voice rough with emotion. "The truth is dangerous, Amelia. Once you hear it, there's no going back." Her hands tightened around his. "Then let me decide if I can handle it." Daniel looked at her for a long moment, his chest rising and falling heavily, before finally nodding. "All right, but not here. Not tonight. Tomorrow I'll tell you everything. But you have to promise me one thing. Stay close to me, no matter what happens." Amelia swallowed hard, her heart pounding with both dread and determination. She nodded slowly. "I promise." Daniel leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently against hers. His voice broke when he whispered, "You mean more to me than anything, Amelia. And I don't know if I can bear losing you again." She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of his closeness calm the storm in her chest. But deep down, she knew. Tomorrow would change everything, because when morning came, she would discover that Daniel's truth was darker than she ever imagined. Amelia barely slept that night. Every sound from the storm outside felt louder, every shadow heavier. Her mind replayed the man in the coat, his cold stare, his words that hinted at danger she couldn't fully understand. And above it all was Daniel, his arms around her, his voice trembling with regret, and the promise that tomorrow he would tell her everything. When dawn finally broke, pale light creeping through her curtains, Amelia found herself pacing the floor of her apartment. She didn't know if she should be afraid of what Daniel would reveal, or afraid of the way her heart still longed for him despite it all. A knock at the door startled her. Her chest tightened until she opened it and saw Daniel standing there, his hair damp from the morning mist, his eyes weary but filled with determination. "Can I come in?" he asked softly. She nodded, stepping aside. He walked in, and for a moment, they just stood there, silence wrapping around them. Finally, Daniel spoke. "I owe you the truth," he said, his voice low. and it's not easy to say. Amelia's hands clasped together, her heart racing. Then just tell me, Daniel. I can't keep wondering. He drew in a deep breath, then began. 2 years ago, I invested in a business I thought was legitimate. It wasn't. It was a front for something darker, illegal trade, money I should never have touched. By the time I realized, it was too late. Walking away wasn't an option. They wanted me involved, and when I resisted, they threatened the people I cared about. Amelia's stomach sank. That's why you left. He nodded, his eyes pained. Yes. I thought distance would protect you, but they never stopped watching me. And last night, when he walked into that cafe, it was a warning. They know about you now. Her breath caught, her chest tightening with fear. So what happens now? Daniel stepped closer, his hand reaching for hers. Now I fight. I've been gathering evidence enough to bring them down, but it's risky. And if you're with me, Amelia, you'll be in danger too. His words were heavy, but the warmth of his hand in hers kept her grounded. She looked up at him, tears shimmering in her eyes. I don't care about the danger. I care about you. For the first time since he walked back into her life, Daniel's expression softened. He leaned closer, his forehead resting gently against hers. You're stronger than I deserve, he whispered. Her heart ached at the tenderness in his voice, but before she could answer, another knock echoed at the door. This one harder, more urgent. Amelia froze. Daniel stiffened, his eyes darting toward the sound. Stay behind me, he whispered. The knock came again, louder this time. Daniel walked to the door and opened it only a crack. A man's voice spoke sharply from the hallway. You're out of time, Daniel. Tonight, you make your choice. Be at the docks at midnight. Bring what we asked for, or she pays the price. Amelia's blood turned cold. Daniel's hand tightened on the doorframe, his voice low and threatening. If you touch her, I swear. But the voice cut him off with a laugh, footsteps retreating down the hall before Daniel could finish. He shut the door quickly, turning back to Amelia with urgency in his eyes. It's worse than I thought. They're not just threatening. They're watching us right now. Amelia's knees trembled, and Daniel rushed to steady her. I won't let them hurt you, he promised fiercely. But if I don't go tonight, everything could spiral out of control. She clung to him, her voice breaking. Daniel, don't face them alone, please. His eyes burned with determination, yet fear lingered there too. Then come with me, tonight at midnight. But once we step into that world together, there's no turning back. Amelia's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. Midnight at the docks. A choice that could change everything. And though fear wrapped tightly around her, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She couldn't let Daniel face it alone. The hours leading up to midnight felt like an eternity. Amelia could barely keep her hands steady as she packed a small bag, though she wasn't sure what she was even preparing for. Daniel moved around her apartment with silent focus, checking his phone, scribbling notes, and slipping papers into an envelope that looked far too important to ignore. What's in there? She finally asked, watching him seal it. Proof, Daniel replied, his jaw set. Bank records, coded transactions, names. Enough to bury them if I get it into the right hands. Amelia swallowed hard. And they know you have it? He nodded grimly. That's why they're forcing this meeting. They want it back. But giving it to them means losing my only chance to end this. The weight of it pressed down on Amelia's chest. She wanted to beg him not to go, to throw the envelope into the fire and lock the door behind them. But she also knew Daniel well, enough to understand he wouldn't stop fighting, not while there was a chance to protect her, to make things right. When the clock struck 11:30, Daniel turned to her. His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed the storm inside. Are you sure you want to come with me? Amelia looked at him, her heart thundering, and nodded. Yes, I told you. I won't let you face this alone. His expression softened, and he reached for her hand. Their fingers intertwined, and in that simple touch, Amelia felt a fragile kind of courage steady her trembling. They left together, the city quiet under the weight of night. Streetlights glowed weakly through the mist, and the distant hum of the river grew louder as they approached the docks. The air smelled of salt and rust, and shadows stretched long over the water. When they reached the pier, Daniel squeezed her hand and whispered, "Stay close." Figures emerged from the darkness. 3 men, one of them the same who had walked into the cafe. His coat swayed in the wind, his face half hidden, but his smirk was unmistakable. "Right on time," this man said smoothly. His eyes shifted to Amelia, narrowing with satisfaction. "And you brought her. How touching." Daniel stepped forward, placing himself between Amelia and the men. His voice was sharp. "You said this was between us. She doesn't belong here," the Baichowar man chuckled. "Everything you love belongs here now, Daniel. That's the price of playing against us." One of the other men held out his hand. "The envelope." Daniel didn't move. His grip on Amelia's hand tightened. "Not until I know she's safe." The man in the coat raised an eyebrow. "You're in no position to negotiate." The tension thickened, the air electric with unspoken threats. Amelia's heart pounded so hard she thought they could hear it. She whispered Daniel's name, her voice trembling, but he gave her hand a reassuring squeeze, never taking his eyes off the men in front of him. "You can take the money, the records," Daniel said slowly. "But if you lay a finger on her, I swear—" Before he could finish, one of the men stepped closer, his eyes fixed on Amelia. Instinctively, she pressed herself against Daniel's side, her breath shallow with fear. The man in the coat smirked, clearly enjoying their fear. "You think you can protect her? You couldn't even protect yourself." Daniel's jaw tightened, his muscles tense as if he was ready to fight, envelope still clutched in his hand. For a moment, Amelia thought he might actually strike first, and then, out of nowhere, a blinding flash of headlights cut across the dock. A car screeched to a halt nearby, its doors flying open. Men in dark jackets poured out, their voices sharp and commanding. "Police! Hands where we can see them!" Amelia gasped, clutching Daniel's arm as the men in the coat spun around in shock. Daniel leaned close to her ear and whispered urgently, "Amelia, listen to me. This is the moment everything changes. No matter what happens next, don't let go of me." Her heart raced, her grip on him tightening as the scene erupted into chaos. Police officers shouted commands, their flashlights cutting through the night. The men in the coat froze at first, their faces pale under the sudden glare, but within seconds, panic set in. One bolted toward the shadows, another raised his hands in surrender, while the man in the coat glared at Daniel with venom in his eyes. "You planned this?" he spat, his voice shaking with fury. Daniel's arm tightened, protectively around Amelia. His voice was steady, unflinching. "I told you, I wasn't going to let you win." The man lunged toward them, but officers were quicker. In a flurry of movement, he was forced to the ground, his hands pinned behind his back as cuffs clicked into place. His angry shouts echoed over the water, carried away by the cold wind. Amelia could barely breathe. She clung to Daniel as the officers moved swiftly, securing the scene, gathering the men, seizing what looked like weapons tucked into their coats. Finally, a detective approached, his expression firm but grateful. "We got your message. And this," he gestured toward the envelope in Daniel's hand, "is the last piece we needed." Daniel nodded, handing it over. "Keep her name out of it," he said quietly. "She doesn't belong in this world." The detective gave a brief nod, then moved on, leaving them standing together in the chaos of flashing lights and cold night air. Amelia looked up at Daniel, her eyes wide with both fear and relief. "You called them?" He nodded, his face softening as he met her gaze. "Last night, after the cafe. I knew they wouldn't stop unless I had help, but I couldn't risk telling you. It would have put you in more danger if they found out." Tears welled in her eyes. "All this time, you carried it alone." His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear as it fell. "And I was wrong too. You deserved to know the truth. You deserved more than silence, Amelia. But even now, even after everything, you stayed. Her voice trembled, but her words were steady. I stayed because I love you. I always have. Even when you broke my heart, even when I was angry, I couldn't stop loving you. Daniel's eyes closed for a moment as though her words were both a balm and a weight he didn't think he deserved. When he opened them again, they glistened. You don't know how much I needed to hear that. Around them, the docks buzzed with sirens and shouts, but in that moment, Amelia barely noticed. All she felt was Daniel's arms wrapping around her, holding her close with a desperate kind of tenderness, as though letting go would mean losing her forever. And when he held her close, she felt things she had never felt before, not just longing or fear, but a fierce hope that love could survive even the darkest storms. The officers began leading the arrested men away, their voices fading into the distance. Slowly, the night grew quiet again, broken only by the soft rush of the river. Daniel pulled back just enough to look at her, his hand still resting against her face. It's over now, at least this part of it. But Amelia, if you don't want to stay after all this, I'll understand. She shook her head immediately, her tears turning into a shaky smile. No, Daniel, I'm not going anywhere. We've lost enough time already. I don't want to waste another moment without you. His lips curved into the faintest smile, tired, but full of hope. He leaned his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling in the cold air. Then we start again, this time with no secrets. Amelia closed her eyes, her heart steady for the first time in what felt like years. Yes, she whispered. This time, we start again. And as the first light of dawn touched the water, painting the docks with the promise of a new day, Amelia knew that no matter what lay ahead, she wasn't afraid anymore, because she wasn't alone. She was in Daniel's arms, and that was enough.